Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to Clause Strategic Vision, wherein we deliberate upon national, regional and global security as well as technology and military affairs. Today we intend to discuss the security dynamics of the Indo-Pacific. I am Namita Barthwal and I am joined by Mr. Rahul Jaibe, and we are research assistants at the Center for Land Warfare Studies. Welcome Rahul. Firstly, I would like you to give a brief review of the security competition that is unfolding in the Indo-Pacific region.
So the security competition that we are seeing in the Indo-Pacific region basically pertains to growing geopolitical rivalry between US and China. So after the post-financial crisis that happened in 2008, US credibility was questioned in the international domain. Moreover, it also started the Pivot to Asia program in 2008, where it started to re-engage with the whole Indo-Pacific countries. Now we also need to look at the Taiwan region as such. So Taiwan situation is very problematic in the sense the Chinese mainland leaders wants forceful unification of the China. But if we see the United States, they don't want that forceful unification to happen. For that particular thing to happen, China has also established the missiles in the eastern part of region that is seen as a threat by Japan and South Korea also. Now we also see a growing competition pertains to sovereignty dispute that is occurring between Japan and China regarding the Senkaku Diado Island. So that has also intensified the security dilemma between these countries. Moreover, if we also see and go by the situation that is there in the North Korea, so China is nuclearizing the North Korean regime, and that has created an intense security dilemma between South Korea and North Korea. Regardless of this, we also need to look into the specific dynamics that is happening between the ASEAN countries and China. So China is using its economic clout and military power at the same time to appease these particular small states, because a lot of disputes have happened between China and these ASEAN countries in regards to the South China Sea dispute. And we see China has regularly used its economic power as well as flexing its military to basically thwart any of the collective actions that are taken by these particular countries.
Okay, so what are the core reasons of this conflict? Why these conflicts are developing in this region?
So the core reasons could be found in the explanations that are given in the theory of international politics, if we talk about. So if we go by the neo-realist explanation, then we have the structure that is anarchic structure, which is basically there is no political or central authority in the world system. So if there is no political or central authority in the world system, that creates a problem, because if a state is increasing its power, that is basically seen as a threat by the other states. So in that particular sense, insecurity develops between the state. So if China's power is growing, that basically means that it is basically a threat to other countries in the Indo-Pacific region, because by developing power, you also have ambitions and the visions and how you want to turn the world according to your own will and power. And if we also go by the explanation of power transition theorists, so in that what happens if there is a relative increase in power of a nation, for example China, and relative decline of power when it comes to US. So always what happens, a relative power or a rising power tries to displace the default power that is there or established power that is there. Now you can ask questions like why it is doing so. It is doing so because it is doing that because it wants its own international system to be there. Because if US have built an international system, that is liberal international order that is it has built, it is beneficial to itself, that is the US, okay, not to the world as such. So if China wants to displace US, it has ambitions and visions, and it wants to have more benefits from the international system. So that could be a good explanation why there is a cause of rivalry, or why a rivalry is developing between these two powers, that is US and China.
So Rahul, tell me, in which areas within the Indo-Pacific do you think conflict can occur?
Okay, so if we take the whole Indo-Pacific regions, I think there are three specific areas we need to focus on, or three zones of contentions rather I would say. So first we need to focus on the Taiwan Strait, because that's a historical rivalry between Chinese mainland and Taiwan. Second, I would like more specifically, I would be preferring that there is a growing rivalry in the South China Sea. Now you need to consider that South China Sea dispute is an evolving dispute where most of the ASEAN countries have sovereignty claims, and China also wants to have sovereignty over these particular islands because that is helping it to have its strategic vision to go ahead. And the third area of dispute I have pointed out earlier is the Senkaku Diado Island, that is basically a zone of contention between Japan and China.
Now let's come to the Southeast Asian states. What foreign policy choices do they have? How they are going to navigate between the United States and China?
So now we need to look into the politics of international system. So whatever theorists that have theorized about the international politics have mainly focused on the great powers. They haven't focused on the small powers as we see in the Southeast Asian countries. So these small powers are like shrimp between the two whales that we are talking about in the international system. So in international politics, small states doesn't have that much agency to guide the international politics the way they want to guide. But if we go by the Southeast Asian countries, they are very much prominent when it comes to their issues. They're highlighting their issues in the international forum, and they have built multilateral institutions like ASEAN to basically have their issues heard in the international domain. So now coming back to the question of what foreign policy choices do these states have, I think the answer given to this question comes from Annie Murphy's article that is very prominent in international affairs. She talks about the strategy that these countries have developed is basically hedging strategy, where they focus on engaging with both the powers but not committing to either of them. Now what this policy does is it maximizes returns to these smaller states and minimizes the risk, because they are not compromising their interest according to the interest of some other states. They don't want to align their own interest with the great power rivalry that is going on between US and China. So I think this strategy works because it creates a multi-dimensional relation with different countries in the international system. Does it accrue benefit, basically economic benefit, say political benefit, or multilateral benefit that comes with such relation? So to conclude my answer here, I would like to quote the foreign diplomat of Singapore, who is Palahari Kaushikam. He basically argued the foreign policy choices of these countries are naturally promiscuous, not monogamous.
So Rahul, can you explain the mindset of these Southeast Asian states? Are these states afraid of the threat that is emanating from China's naval power?
Yeah, if we go by the Chinese incursion recently in the South China Sea, especially the Whitsun Reef, then we can say that China's threat is increasing. Its incursions, its aggressive behavior is increasing in this region. And historically, if we go by the Chinese naval adventurism into these small islands in the South China Sea, we find that China has done that regularly. So I believe there is a strong feeling or perception into these particular countries who believe that there is a growing Chinese threat. And if we go by the relation of specific countries, say Philippines, so Renato de Cruz Castro, he is a foreign analyst, and he basically argued that there is a growing threat perception of China into the minds of foreign policy makers of Philippines. And he has also given evidences pertaining to how this will basically eventualize. He talks about the Philippines growing a strategic tilt towards USA when it comes to the mutual defense treaty that they have signed, in which it specifically mentions that US will come to the defense of Philippines if there is a growing aggressiveness of Chinese into the exclusive economic zones of these countries. Then we also see a growing quasi-relationship that is developing between Malaysia and China, even if there is Chinese threat, but we cannot negate the growing economic relationship that is brewing between Malaysia and Beijing. So when Najib Razak visited Beijing in 2016, he got a huge chunk of capital, and that chunk of capital was later being invested into the railway projects and infrastructure lines. So we see growing Chinese economic clot when it comes to its relation with the Malaysian state. And if we go by the relation that China has with the Vietnam, then we can basically say that Vietnam is particularly balancing against Chinese threat. So whether the balancer is a piece that is written by Adam Leff. He argues that the military expenditure of Vietnam is increasing, and moreover it has been a biggest importer of arms between the year 2014 to 15. So we see the different behavior that is attributed to different states in the Indo-Pacific region. So not all states are balancing the Chinese threat. Some are using Chinese economic power to enhance their own economic growth. So for example, in the Philippines or say Malaysia, so they are using Chinese loans, Chinese investments to grow their own economic power. But at the same time, they are very much insecure about growing Chinese incursions into the South China Sea. So we cannot at the outset say what type of relationship that these particular countries have, but we can basically suggest, or we have a pattern developing where these countries are engaging with China economically, but their security is guaranteed by the United States.
So Rahul, tell me, what is the role of India in the Indo-Pacific? Is it trade-oriented or security-oriented?
So the role of India in the Indo-Pacific region doesn't have to basically form in these two groups, like is it economic oriented or security oriented? We don't have to look on the extremes at this point. It is both, it is reflecting both. So we need to take into consideration India's investment into the South China Sea, basically when it comes to the oil exploration that we are doing in these particular regions. Moreover, we also need to look at the aspect of most of the goods that are coming from the Southeast Asian countries, or say the East Asian countries, basically passes through the Malacca Strait. So India's investment into the region has been economically focused, but we also need to take into consideration the security aspects. So India wants to increase its naval footprint into the South China Sea, because through that it will deter the Chinese actions that it is doing in the border areas. So in that particular aspect, if we consider, we have both economic as well as security interests developing in these regions. Moreover, I would also like to point that India's image is very pleasant and kind when it comes in the mind of the Southeast Asian countries, because we don't have as such legacy issues with these particular countries. Say for example, US, it has legacy issues with the Vietnam. We don't have that kind of legacy issues when it comes to political relations that we have with these particular countries. So in my opinion, it is both. The orientation of Indian foreign policy is to preserve both the economic as well as security interests that are developing in the Indo-Pacific region.
Rahul, tell me, how do you see the emergence of Quad in the Indo-Pacific region?
When it comes to contemporary times, if you see, there is a rising China in the Indo-Pacific region, and we have arguments where scholars argue that there is a declining US power in the region. So if we see a shift in the balance of power, and when there is a shift in balance of power, there is a growing security threat that these particular countries in the Indo-Pacific basically have. So if we go by that particular argument where the security interest is privileged in the Indo-Pacific region, then we can say there is an emergence of Quad, because Quad as a grouping is a multilateral partnership that is going on between these four countries, say India, USA, Australia and Japan. So by clubbing these particular countries, we have a grouping which has power that is quite relative or quite equivalent to the power of the power of China. So in that particular aspect, we see there is an emergence because of the insecurity that is developing in the Indo-Pacific region.
And what are these challenges? What are the challenges they are going to face in the future when they are going to provide net security to these Indo-Pacific countries?
So the challenges that we are seeing is quite prominent. For example, China and Japan has sovereignty contest when it related to Senkaku Diadu Island, and we are also seeing the Chinese incursion into Australian domestic politics as well. And if you go by the Indian state, then we have border clash that happened in June 2020 in the Galwan Valley. So going back that particular logic, we see in all the domain China is trying to infiltrate into these particular countries, whether it's in domestic politics or whether it's in security domain. So by that logic, if I say there is a growing Chinese threat when it comes to when it comes in the strategic calculation of these countries. So here lies the emergence of Quad. The further challenges that Quad will have has to be in the domain of institutionalization, because Quad as a group is not a formal grouping. It's basically touted as an informal security partnership. And these scholars like Tanvi Madan, who is a Quadologist, she also argued that Quad has to be institutionalized properly so that it could function in a much more broader in much more broader parameters. So we also need to conceptualize Quad. Besides security domain, we can see Quad is also having different functions in the domain of economics as well as diplomacy. So Quad is also giving alternative mechanisms to the countries in the Southeast Asia to get loans from these financial groupings, so that they don't have to depend on Chinese for the loans, and they don't have to face the checkbook diplomacy of China. So to conclude, we see a growing formation where these particular group of countries are focusing both on their form of Quad, that is as an institution, and also on the functions, which was not in the prior Quad if we talk about. So this is a new revitalized Quad 2.0 that we are seeing, and I believe it has the capacity as well as will to counter the Chinese threat, growing Chinese threat in the Indo-Pacific region. And if it does not work in that particular direction, where it provides its more function in sense of economic security or say climate change, it has to create new governance models. So if it does that, then it would be a successful story for Quad in the years to come.
Thank you, Rahul, for discussing this issue with us, and thank you, ladies and gentlemen, for joining us.